There is a new world order on the stage this morning, which is surprising a great many people because last night, certainly most of America thought that there was a significant chance that Kamala Harris would be the president-elect this morning. And well, things didn't quite go according to script. And there are some significant ramifications, some dramatic actually, about the world that the United States is going to find itself in, and then the condition of the world around, based on the elevation or the reacquisition rather of Trump to a second term with one in between. And to try to make sense out of some of this and try to get our heads around what may be coming, we have Larry Johnson, former CIA analyst and author at Solar21.com, son of a New American Revolution on Substack. Larry, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Danny. Always a joy to be with you.
It always is there. And I really like that shirt, by the way. I mean, we call you Larry the shirt. And I see some Army logos on there. So, I'm kind of partial to it. But
it's a West Point, Florida shirt. I got it from a buddy of mine who's a West Point grad.
Well, it's awesome. And I'll be looking in the mail for mine. So I'm kidding, of course. Well, listen, let's jump right into this whole notion of the New World Order that the Wall Street Journal was talking about. And I don't think that that's hyperbole. The kind of administration the United States is going to have with Trump at the top, as opposed to what it would have been with Harris at the top, I think is about as different as night and day. And
right.
Even get into some of the specifics about it. I mean, what is your, your observations about this election? I think I saw in one of your Solar21 posts, you actually were one of the few that saw this coming.
Yeah. What has happened is Trump understood that the media world has changed. It's now a world of social media, shows like yours. Go back 4 years in 2020, there was still, it was important to be on legacy media, to be on the cable news shows, Fox, CNN, MSNBC, or on the corporate media, ABC, CBS, NBC. But what's happened in the last 4 years is people, particularly those under the age of 45, have moved completely away from sitting down and watching those conventional channels. Instead, you got people like Joe Rogan with 18 million subscribers. I mean, you've got a significant number of subscribers yourself. People tune in to watch you and to listen. And that's what Trump tapped into. And in tapping into that, he didn't follow sort of the traditional, what I'll call partisan playbook, that whether you're Republican or Democrat, you line up your own people and then you reward them after the election. He reached out. And so the fact that he was able to negotiate, make a deal with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to say, hey, you've got some very, interesting ideas about the healthcare and the influence of the pharmaceutical industry in American politics. I want you to come into my administration, reaching out to people like Tulsi Gabbard, and then going on the Joe Rogan experience, which again, with 18 million subscribers. And I think that video has been viewed by more than 50 million people. So Trump tapped into that, and the Washington establishment, and this is not just Democrat, but it's also with the sort of the embedded Republicans, who they gaslighted people. They kept telling them that, oh, you're not miserable, you're happy. Oh, you're not experiencing inflation, prices are great. Oh, you're not experiencing troubles with employment. We got full, they kept lying. And people, frankly, I think were fed up with those lies. So a sizable majority, voted for Donald Trump, and Washington is in shock today. That's good.
And it's as much an impression as it is a fact in some cases, because some of the things that the Democrats were saying were certainly true as far as numbers go. But I think where they dropped the ball, or at least one of the places where they dropped the ball, is that sometimes numbers can be factually reported from what they say, but there's a disconnect from what other, like, larger numbers of Americans are experiencing, right, or they perceive that they're experiencing. I think that's a really good point that you make when you basically tell them that, hey, don't worry, inflation is not a big deal. It's just not. And then you're like, dude, I just paid for my groceries. So you're telling me that what I just saw pop out of my savings account didn't happen. And of course, then that just makes you angry because it feels like you're not being listened to and you're being talked down to. And I think that I think you're right. I think that had a bigger impact than many are willing to consider.
I mean, just a simple example. Look, I got 2 Rottweilers. Okay, so these are big boys, big boy, big girl, 135 pounds each, and we feed them raw meat. So I buy these logs of hamburger, and a year and a half ago, we were paying $9.95. Cost of that now, $17. Now, and the thing with the way they track inflation in the United States, they don't count that in there. It's just food. That's not an essential. Oh, what? When people are having to pay double the price for eggs, simple things. So the fact that this political establishment is sort of out of touch. Now, look, Trump is bombastic. Trump says inappropriate things at times. But I think what we're going to see now with this administration coming in, we're going to see something, you and I really haven't seen, I think, in our lifetime, where you're going to have a complete shakeup. The traditional way of rewarding those who made the most financial contributions to your campaign, that's going out. Instead, what you're going to see is the possibility of, can you imagine Tulsi Gabbard as Secretary of Defense? Or maybe...
So along that lines, now let me get your reaction to this. This was just sent to me just a short time ago on a classified, on a signal.
Yeah.
Signal and classified. And it was sent by someone who is very well connected to the insider Washington place here. And he said he just got this he just talked to a former colleague who talked to the neocon Herbst from the Atlantic Council. Quote, I asked him who he heard was the top NatSec jobs. Tom Cotton for Secretary of Defense, Haggerty at State Department, O'Brien CIA, Grinnell National Security Advisor. And they are very excited about these possibilities. That is as classic and mainstream neocon as it gets. Do you think that Trump is going to fall into that trap?
Well, if he does, then he didn't learn a damn thing from his first tour as president. Okay? If he falls for that, then shame on him, and he will reap what he sows. He's been given a historic opportunity to really make a change in how business is done. I don't see a problem so much with Grinnell, but Tom Cotton has no business being Secretary of Defense. He is, and frankly, I doubt that will happen, because the last thing Trump wants to do is take another Republican out of the Senate and put him into an executive position. They're already going to lose J.D. Vance, and that's going to lead to another election in Ohio. So they've got to take that into consideration. We'll find out. The fact that Vivek Ramaswamy is going to be involved, that Tulsi Gabbard is going to be involved, that RFK Jr. is going to be involved. It remains to be seen who's going to be put in charge of Homeland Security. Department of Justice, they've talked about Harmeet Dillon, this Indian woman, lawyer out of California, who's been very active. But if Trump goes with the security establishment, then it's gonna. I think it'll ultimately blow up in his face.
Well, let's talk that through for a second, because some of the dynamics that are ordinarily in place for somebody who wins the White House are not here. I.e., this is his second term, so there won't be a re-election. So he doesn't have to worry about making any donors or anybody else happy, because he's that's just not on the table, because he's not have to worry about getting reelected. Now, he does have to keep certain people happy if he wants anything to happen in the House or the Senate. We still don't know how the House is going to come out, but he's got to keep people happy in the Senate. So there's some of that. But what are the pros and cons from Trump's perspective of giving into this system and having somebody like Cotton or any of these others? I've also heard that one of the other folks I've heard is former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is also in the running here, which I think would be just utterly disastrous. But What are the pressures on Trump to say yes or to say no to that?
Well, actually, I don't think he's got pressure to have to say yes or no to that because he's not beholden to the money. The one person who reportedly gave him money, the widow of Sheldon Adelson, is going to perhaps steer policy with respect to Israel. Now, again, Trump during his first term, he did what no other U.S. president ever did when he brought the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem. Everybody going back to Ronald Reagan had promised they were going to do it, and then they got in there and were talked out of it. Well, Trump went through with that, and then at the time when that happened, we were told, "Oh my God, this is going to set the Middle East on fire. It's going to cause a complete collapse." Well, that didn't happen either. Now, the Trump's weakness in this regard is, and it's ironic, he himself, in terms of his political outlook, is very pro-Zionist. And yet, if you read a lot of the Israeli media, I was looking at a couple of articles yesterday, they were touting, "Oh my God, Donald Trump's the worst thing that could ever happen to Israel." So, he doesn't necessarily have a clear, mandate or relationship on that front. But he is,
So look at the other half of that. What is his motivation to have some of these, like Tulsi Gabbard, for example, at say Secretary of State, which I think would be an exceptional pick if anyone wanted my opinion, or anybody who's not of the quote neocon, just regular old swamp.
Well, and we're looking, Doug McGregor. I hope to God he's on the list and they're going to bring him back in. Because at least McGregor knows where some of the bodies are buried, and
Wait, did we say that on air?
Yeah. Well, and remember with what Trump experienced, particularly in his last year, and I don't think he has Alzheimer's. He gave orders to the military that they ignored,
Yeah,
that they disobeyed.
About that, right?
And so right off the bat, there ought to be a series of court-martials. Mark Milley.
Sorry to interrupt, but that's one thing just been a real pet peeve of mine. One of the things that Trump allowed himself to be talked out of was that McGregor had personally, painstakingly got was an authorization to end the Afghan war and to get the troops withdrawn before he left office. I think on the 17th of January of 2021 was when that was supposed to have happened. Trump signed it and then allowed, as he later bragged, former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, bragged about how he and the acting SecDef talked him out of it. And look at the disaster that happened because of that. Had Trump made his order stick and said, "I didn't ask your opinion, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I just gave you a damn order, execute time now." If he had said that then, we would have gotten out in order. There still would have been an Afghan government. There still would have been an Afghan military. The Taliban were nowhere near ready to have any kind of reaction at that point. Just imagine how many, and all of those Americans that were killed at the gate there in Kabul would still be alive, et cetera. So, yeah, if you talk about learning a lesson, right. I hope that he can see that he was not served well by the administration, by the key people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, look at his first term of presidency as like an internship. We'll see if he learned anything during that internship. Learned that, because he really was very naive when he showed up in Washington, despite all of his past business experience and dealing with all the, corruption in New York City. He was entirely too trusting. So we'll see how fast he acts. I mean,
well, let's do it. And in fact, let's look at some of those specific areas. So the Wall Street Journal was talking about a new world order, and there could be some. And let's look at three of the areas that they mentioned in there. First of all is the Russia-Ukraine war. And of course, this is the biggest difference between the Harris campaign and the Trump campaign, in that the Harris campaign was just going to be the Biden status quo extending on into the future. And Trump was like, no, hard stop. We're going to have a negotiated settlement. Now that he's actually going to be the president on the 20th of January, how do you see that playing out?
Well, he's not going to have a lot of control over it. Russia dictates the terms. Russia is running the day. They are dominating militarily. And so Trump will try to negotiate a deal where, and it'll be up to the Russians to decide, do we want to deal with this guy or not? I mean, at least the good news is with someone like Trump, you're likely to get communications reestablished with Moscow. However, we can't ignore the fact that it was also under Trump that the additional sanctions were imposed on Moscow, and he sold arms to Ukraine. Now, he did that during his first term. Maybe he's awakened and realized, that was a mistake. So, the driver on this car is Vladimir Putin. It's not Donald Trump. Donald Trump can perhaps beg for a ride and get in, but he's not going to be able to, steer the car and determine the ultimate destination.
But wouldn't it make sense from Russia's perspective if they can achieve with the negotiated outcome something that's satisfactory to them, as opposed to paying for it with more military?
Absolutely. No, you're correct. But I don't any effort by Trump to offer that kind of deal is going to, again, lead to the accusations that he is under the control of Vladimir Putin, he is a Kremlin puppet, and that he's selling out to the Russians. That was when they first decided back in December of 2015 to put that Russia label on Putin. And this was done by John Podesta and another guy named Badowski. That they saw this as a way to make it impossible for Donald Trump to actually do anything productive or positive on the foreign relations front with Vladimir Putin and with Russia. And they deliberately created this, that we have to be enemies of Russia as opposed to being, just adversaries. And so, I think Trump has still got some guardrails that may prevent him from developing the kind of relationship with Russia that we need to have, because the United States and Russia share a lot in common, but we have so alienated them that I don't know if we can ever get back on a stable footing.
I actually, to your point there, you mentioned when Trump and his administration approved a lot of these Stinger missiles and several other kinds of weapons that the previous administration had not. I'm going to show you a clip here in a second where he, on the one hand, kind of brags about doing that and talk about how, because he loved to say things that he did that Obama didn't. But then look at the second half of this, because then he has a view which I think is sorely needed right now.
We put up a lot of money. I gave you anti-tank busters that, frankly, President Obama was sending you pillows and sheets. And I gave you anti-tank busters. And a lot of people didn't want to do that, but I did it. And I really hope that Russia, because I really believe that President Putin would like to do something, I really hope that you and President Putin get together and can solve your problem. That would be a tremendous achievement. And I know you're trying to do that.
Now, aside from the facial expression on Zelensky, because it's not exactly what he wanted to hear, but I wonder if you have any insight or just your best estimate on what Trump's intent was to say, yeah, I'm going to give these weapons here, but toward the end of having a negotiated settlement. Do you think that either he didn't actually put everything together, he just took that action, or do you think that it was designed to say, hey, make a deal, Russia, and otherwise I'm going to keep giving this stuff? Do you have any knowledge of that?
Donald Trump is not Karl von Clausewitz. Okay, so he's not a strategic thinker. He's a deal maker. And part of that, I know from a buddy of mine who was involved with a lot of intel briefings of Trump, that Trump was getting a lot of pressure from, let's call it both the intelligence and the national security and military establishment to move in that direction of supplying arms to Ukraine. And that's what you heard. He did it. He caved on that. But at the same time, he recognizes, hey, let's get a deal. We don't need to do all this fighting. And the fact that, he was ultimately betrayed by Zelensky, the cocaine cowboy, in the first impeachment trial of Donald Trump, that I think Trump is going to hold. He's not going to forget that. And there's no empathy, there's no sympathy, there's no kindness as far as Donald Trump is concerned with respect to Zelensky. And Zelensky now knows that his days are numbered. With Trump's victory, this black hole of Ukraine is no longer going to be sucking in U.S. taxpayer dollars at $1 billion a day.
And toward that end, Gary, do you have that Viktor Orban clip? Is that queued up there? I want to go to that because you're talking about changing of the New World Order. There's a lot of people in Europe are sad and have a lot of trepidation about Trump because they're thinking, oh my God, he's going to get rid of NATO or something like that. But there are another band of those in the Middle East who view things like Viktor Orban.
I see a shining victory, perhaps the biggest comeback in the history of Western politics. It's been a huge fight. He was threatened with prison. His wealth was confiscated. They wanted to kill him. The whole media world turned against him in America, and he still won. This means a big encouragement for those who believe in willpower, fighting, perseverance. For the world, it means the hope of peace. At the start of the year, we hoped that by the end of the year, the pro-peace forces would be in the majority, and we will defeat the pro-war forces. Now there is a huge chance for this. And if this happens, then the economy can take an upturn, and the US-Hungarian relations can return to the old golden age. We have several plans that we can achieve in the coming years with President Donald Trump.
Now, Orban has taken a lot of heat, actually has throughout, especially among the liberal elite in the United States, is, being, they always use this title, oh, he's the best friend of Putin in Europe, et cetera. And they never talk about, no, he's actually pro-Hungary, and he thinks this is what makes sense. But now I think a lot of his views are starting to be validated as having been right all along. And with Trump coming in power, my question to you is, to what extent do you think this will influence others in Europe to move in this same orbit?
Well, I think it's going to influence several. And look at the hole Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, has dug for himself. He sent members of the Labour Party to the United States to actively campaign for Kamala Harris. That is election interference on a scale that's unimaginable, because it's one thing to do it through covert action, but to do it in such an overt way. And the things that David Lammy, the foreign minister of the UK, has said about Donald Trump, Trump can be forgiving in some areas. He's going to remember this. So the United Kingdom, the special relationship with Great Britain, that's getting flushed. And that's good. And the Brits are in no condition. They have a pathetic army. They have a pathetic navy. They're not. All they are is a big. They're like a yappy little dog. They bark loudly, but they can't bite. They're toothless, and they're just annoying, is what they are. And then Germany. Look at Germany. They're in an economic collapse. Volkswagen's closing plants. Other automobile manufacturers are talking about closing plants. The Germans are losing jobs, and all of it because of why? Because Joe Biden thought it was a good idea to blow up the Nord Stream pipeline. Now, Trump doesn't get a pass on that too, because he made a point trying to stop Nord Stream when he was president. So, and I think his goal there was the same maybe as Biden's, try to make the Europeans dependent upon U.S. natural gas producers. But that is much more expensive natural gas. And so what Joe Biden's presided over is the complete loss of U.S. prestige and authority, not only in Europe, but throughout the world.
Well, let's keep on this Great Britain issue for a second, because that did get a lot of angst here in the United States in some quarters. In others, it was applauded, of course, because especially the liberal, some of the media, and certainly those for Kamala Harris, were loving it. They were like, well, that's different. Of course, it's different. I don't know how it's different, but it happened. So now then, I mean, Trump is not going to come in and certainly turn, the UK into an enemy or whatever. But what do you think it might look like for this new Trump world order? Well,
it is what the new Trump world order will be is trying to see if they can stop BRICS and to dig ourselves out of this world of imposing sanctions on every country in the world that we don't like or we have a problem with. Because ultimately those sanctions are not hurting those countries as much as they're hurting the United States and its allies.
Yeah.
So the real question now will be, will NATO survive? because they're going to lose in Ukraine. And while there's a lot of brave talk among, the Germans and the French, Macron, and we got to pull together now, we're on our own. The fissures that are developing there, where every country is going to seek its own benefit, is going to undermine that unity. And when you look at Starmer in particular in the UK, he's already, even though he won the Labour Party won a massive victory a year ago, his political standing has fallen so far that frankly, if they held the election today, they'd get knocked out. So, and
by the way, I don't know if you saw that headline. Yeah, Gary just popped up there. Now he's like putting the brakes on and hitting the reverse real quick. And it's really important to keep good relations with the U.S.
Yeah,
now that Trump is in there. So,
yeah, he
that's
just
interesting.
He's an idiot. And again, you think that, hey, if I'm going to try to do something to swing an election for a particular party like Kamala Harris, you do it covertly. You do it quietly. No, this guy was trumpeting it. And again, you got to think that you need to think through, if I do this, what's the consequence? Candidly, that's sort of like what the Israelis are doing. Yeah, we're going to go bomb Iran. What comes next? Well, they haven't thought that through. And this is where Starmer hasn't thought it through. They haven't thought through the reality that when they started backing Ukraine in this covert war and then became an open war against Russia, back in 2022, Ukraine had the strongest, largest army in Europe, bigger, better trained, and better equipped than either the United Kingdom, Germany, France, all of them. And what's happened to it in the last 2.5 years? The Russians literally have torn it apart and are going to continue doing so. So the Europeans are going to have to come to the realization they don't have a military answer to Russia. Their only answer is to figure out if they can find a diplomatic solution and that they can find a way to live in peace with the Russians. Because Russia was not talking about invading them. It was NATO that continued to expand eastward, despite repeated pleas from the Russians, don't do it. Despite repeated pleas from the Russians, from Vladimir Putin going back to 2000, saying, hey, let us join you in NATO. No, we can't have that, because by God, if we have that, we can't justify an $800 billion defense budget.
Yeah, I mean, you got to have an enemy.
Yeah.
You can't maintain that. So we can't be friends, because then who would we fight against? And yeah, that's just not going to work for us.
Yeah, it's not. It's a stockholder in Raytheon or Lockheed Martin or Boeing or whatever. That's not good for your stock price.
Let me ask you a question. You said something a second ago. I want to jump back to a little bit, and you were talking about BRICS and slowing it down, et cetera. It seems to me that if the U.S. wants to do anything to slow down BRICS, the worst thing it can do is to try to actively oppose it through whatever means, because then that's going to accelerate it. But is there a way for the United States to do the opposite and to reduce the external pressure that's actually pushing people away from the Western world to the BRICS and that orientation? What could the U.S. do if it actually wanted to? You can't stop it, but maybe to mitigate the negative potential consequences. Is there any way the U.S. could benefit from BRICS?
Yeah, stop imposing sanctions on countries and that trade in U.S. dollars and using the power of the dollar to threaten them and to tie up their finances. That's the primary thing that's driving this move to BRICS. Because every time the United States has a disagreement with a country, particularly over the last 6 years, our first option is, well, we're going to impose sanctions. And countries all of a sudden that they had investments, they had held U.S. Treasury bonds, they had U.S. bank accounts, and all of a sudden their assets are frozen and they're going, well, I can't live like that. The same thing would happen if a bank, they started coming after you personally and froze your bank accounts, then you'd find another way to store your money and another way to carry out financial transactions. You might go out and buy gold and silver and keep that. That's exactly what the world's doing. So the first thing the United States could do is say, you know what? We're lifting all economic sanctions on all of these countries. That, I mean, that would be a game changer.
And what would you say to the opponents of that who say, appeaser? You know, now we give that away, and now then we have no leverage. We can't do anything to Iran, and they're just going to run rampant, and they're going to have a field day. What do you say to them?
Yeah, and turn around and say, give me one example, just one, where we imposed economic sanctions and we achieved either a change in government or a change of policy. Give me one. You know, we got 64 years with Cuba. How's that worked out? Well, you got a lot of 1940, 1950 automobiles down in Cuba that are still running somehow, but we haven't changed the Cuban government. Well, you know, Americans ought to have enough sense to understand that openness, freedom, that's where change actually comes from. That's why this Biden administration and these social media giants like Google have been so intent on trying to shut down the conservative use of social media, control what was being said. You know, think about it, Danny. Can you name a single popular social media site that's leftist, where people are going, God, man, I got to go listen to that? No, they don't exist. Instead, you know, you get the Joe Rogans, you get the Tucker Carlsons, you get the Charlie Kirks, you get the Jack Posobics, you got a Danny Davis. You know, it's just, you find a media that is responsive to what people want, not what they're being told that they need. And you know, this is what has terrified people like Bill Gates and others with Donald Trump coming back in. And frankly, it was facilitated in part by Elon Musk. And you've heard the calls from some on the left saying, we got to punish Musk. We got to eliminate. He doesn't get any more government contracts. We're going to make him pay. This revenge mentality that is so part of the Washington corruption is hopefully going to come to an end.
Yeah, that picture Gary's showing right there, where Elon tweeted that out. I assure you that's going to resonate with a lot of people on the right.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's just, what Musk did, you know, if you can we need to come up with a new prize and award it to him. Not that he needs prizes. He's already wealthy enough. But his decision, his decision to buy Twitter and to allow it to be open for debate, open for political controversy, was huge. Because, you know, I post on Facebook, about every other article that I post gets taken down for, quote, spam.
Really?
It's not spam. Oh yeah, no, they take it down. Anything that I have to say that's critical of what's going on in the Middle East gets taken down. And they accuse me of spam. Got blasted off of YouTube. And so, you know, these alternative media spots you have to look for, and that's where Musk really made a difference. Then he said, "No, we're going to stop that," and that I think has been a very influential move.
One other area I want to look at here before we move on from what a new world order might look like, and let's look back. You mentioned it a minute ago, the Middle East. So Trump's coming in there now. He tried to get the Abraham Accords. Actually, did get the Abraham Accords started. Actually made some progress. He was really ridiculed a lot in the first part of his administration last time, but actually got some things done, and was, again, had that same mentality that you see apply. He's looking for deals. Mm-hmm. He's looking for ways to get things negotiated, not conflict. Now then, though, it's going to be a very different Middle East that he's going to encounter from the last time. And Israel, as you and I talked about many times, is embarked on a 7-front war it can't win. And right. So does Trump come in and just say, okay, some of my experts have told me that this is militarily unattainable, but whatever, it's Israel, so I'm just going to keep giving them money and just let it go wherever it goes? Or do you think he'll try to do something different? How do you see that playing out?
Well, I think it may be out of his control by the time he takes office. Bibi Netanyahu has apparently embarked on a suicide mission. So when he fired Yoav Gallant yesterday, and as his defense minister, Gallant was one, you know, in terms of their policy towards the Palestinians, there was no, you know, the Gallant and Netanyahu were not at odds. You know, they both agreed we've got to get rid of these Palestinians. You know, we'll exterminate them. But Gallant at least had been a senior commander in the Israeli army. He had been at least a division level commander. And so he understood, as you know, through your experience, that officers, particularly as they move up the chain of command, they get a bigger picture view of what's going on. Israel Katz, who's replaced Gallant, he was never even a senior commander of any sort. He was a soldier. He understood sort of the grunt level view. Well, that's who Netanyahu has replaced him with. And the problem between Netanyahu and Gallant prior to this was Gallant was like, listen, we don't need to go into southern Lebanon right now because militarily we're not actually being able to finish our mission in Gaza. And he was a voice of caution, of not that he disagreed with the political objectives or political ends that Netanyahu wanted to go after, but he was pushing back on our military can't do that. Well, Netanyahu, with a very limited military experience, Ben-Gvir, Smotrich, they're all the ultimate Israeli armchair generals. Oh, we need to go bomb Iran. We need to do this. And so what they're doing is extending what's already a overstressed Israeli military, and as a result, they're going to break it. And so what I'm saying is Israel could do something so stupid and dangerous in the next 2 months before Trump even gets into office that you could really be seeing Israel faced with an existential crisis that we could not recover from.
But what let's say though that it just stumbles forward and it's not too much different than it is right now. How do you see Trump engaging based on what you've seen him in the first term?
Well, outwardly, publicly, he's going to be very pro-Israeli. Behind the scenes, I think you're going to see a push on negotiations to try to get them to come around. And he'll be willing to play. I think Trump will be willing to play hardball with Israel, even though he's given a pledge to Sheldon Adelson's wife, because the last thing he wants to do is get the United States embroiled in a big war in the Middle East. And that's been the centerpiece of his program, keeping us out of wars, not seeing if he can get us into a new one.
And what about, because I can certainly make a very strong case that if you love Israel, if you're pro-Israel, then you should push them to make some kind of negotiated settlement, because to get them off this path to like you said, it could degenerate into an existential crisis or have the risk of expanding if it's not managed properly. So, playing hardball is actually pro-Israel, quite frankly. But
yeah,
then the wild card here, and this is where I think Trump may have a bit of a blind spot. Want to see your thoughts, and that is on Iran, because he bought into this whole thing, which I think was, frankly, my opinion is it was sold to him when he came in the first time, that you have to be all in against Iran. You have to have maximum pressure, get us out of the JCPOA, etc. And so that was his legacy of getting us out of there. So what does he do now coming back in, since we're already on a threads bare issue between an all-out war between Iran and Israel? What does he do to navigate that?
I think the only thing that would ultimately change not only Trump's opinion, but let's be realistic, that the vast majority of Americans accept the narrative that Iran is a terrorist state. It's the number one sponsor of terrorism in the world. It is the number one cause of all problems in the Middle East. And if we just get rid of Iran, everything will be hunky-dory. That's the perception. I think the only thing that will change that is if there is a military encounter between Iran, Israel, and the United States, in which Israel and the United States lose. And the recent example of this, of just the foolishness, in my view, of the part of U.S. military planners. They deployed 6 B-52s to Qatar at Al Udeid Air Force Base. I mean, good Lord, that's about 275 miles, 300 miles from Iran. Iran could launch missiles that would hit that base in a warning time of, they'd have less than 5 minutes warning. They wouldn't be able to get out there and fire up those B-52s and get them off the ground. Now, why the hell do you put them there? Because it just is, hey, we're big, we've got strength. it shows just an incredibly foolish choice on the part of U.S. military planners. They could have, if the goal was to use them in any kind of military capacity, to use, what are, air-launched ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, because they're certainly not going to fly over Iran to drop, conventional bombs. They get shot down in a heartbeat. But if you're going to use them, put them out of Diego Garcia, for God's sake, because at least there you got some distance standoff that you can get advance warning if something's inbound. But to put them right there at Al Udeid, what are you trying to do? So what I'm saying is we could find a situation where that Iran says now it's going to strike Israel. And if it does, Israel's going to try to strike back. And if the United States participates in that in any way, Iran will strike back at Israel and the United States. And so out of that, then all of a sudden when we find out, we wake up and say, yeah, we couldn't stop the Houthis, and we certainly can't stop the Iranians. Maybe we need to take a different approach to this. Because militarily, we cannot defeat Iran. It would require mobilizing a 3 million man army. It would require forward deploying it in the assumption that nobody's going to interfere with our forward deployment. And then that we could sustain that line of communications to supply troops as we try to invade a country that's 4 times the size of Iraq. And we had trouble containing Iraq, which is just 1/4 the size. So that's why I said we need to get out of this mentality that we have to see Iran as an implacable foe, an enemy, and recognize, there are some diplomatic avenues that are there, and we need to pursue those.
Yeah, and not even an implacable enemy, but an enemy that has to be destroyed.
Yeah,
I mean, just take Naftali Bennett. They just and so many others we've had on here a bunch of times, like with what's his name, the former general Jack Keane.
Yeah,
certainly Lindsey Graham, who's the biggest cheerleader in the Senate. But you see that we can't coexist. They must be destroyed. They can't be lived with. And there's just this obsession. But I just don't see how it turns into anything good. Do you think that there's any chance that Iran may recalibrate its decision in light of the fact that Trump won as opposed to Harris?
Not yet. No, at least not in the short term. They're dealing with what the reality is now, and they recognize that, particularly with Israel by getting rid of Gallant. If I'm on the Iranian intelligence service or with the Revolutionary Guard or with the military, I'm looking at what the turn Israel has taken, and recognize, hey, they're going to be more aggressive, not less. Gallant, at least I think, was perceived as being able to impose some restraint. Now those restraints are off, and Netanyahu is reckless and can do anything. So I fully expect that the Iranians are going to do everything they can to really damage Israel's military capability and cripple its ability to respond, because they're already struggling to deal with Hamas and Hezbollah. And despite all their bold talk about they're going to take out this and take out that, the reality is something else. And again, what Americans need to understand is it would be one thing if Iran had embarked on an active campaign to attack Americans and kill Americans around the world. They have not. The reality is otherwise. It's the United States that is funding, supporting, enabling the Mujahideen al-Khalq, the MEK, who are actually carrying out terrorist attacks inside Iran. Now, we know if Iran was backing Mexican cartels or any other group that were carrying out, 3 or 4 terrorist attacks inside the United States every year, we would be outraged. And yet we do this to Iran and think, well, what's their problem? What are they getting upset about? So and to claim that they're the number one sponsor of terrorism, okay, go to the State Department's Bureau of Counterterrorism. Look at their statistical index. Not a single one of the top 10 groups that are identified as carrying out terrorist attacks around the world, not one of them is sponsored by Iran. Not one.
Yeah, no one's going to be looking at that list because we don't want
Yeah.
to see the actual facts. They're the boogeyman, and we have to kill them.
Right.
But we'll see. I think it's pretty safe to say that there is going to be a new world when President Trump gets back in office, and we'll see if he's learned a lot of the lessons from last time. And I think a lot of that's going to depend on, we'll see about which personnel he puts in some of these key places. I think that'll tell us a lot about what we can expect, even more than we've got so far. We'll certainly keep an eye on that. As we close out this episode today, I just kind of want to get your thoughts generally on this election, the whole reason why there's going to be a new world order. And I'm going to show you two really short clips that I think really illustrate what went wrong here for Harris and what went right for Trump. You've already talked about how Trump, I think, recognized just like he recognized in 2016, things had changed, and how he would, how he tapped into that. And now then he recognizes the shift away from legacy media and into the alternative media, if that's what you want to call it. But there was this image last night. I was watching as this stuff was unfolding, and the first one was they went to the Harris campaign and the headquarters, and the guy comes out and he says, she's not going to talk tonight. I mean, we're still counting votes, so we'll see you in the morning. Everything's going to be fine. And you just had this depressed look on everybody's face, and then everybody just kind of went away like ants. Then this from Fox News. Watch.
The Fox News decision desk can now officially project that Donald Trump will become the 47th president of the United States.
The former president's comeback will be complete with a win in Wisconsin, a state that he narrowly lost 4 years ago. He is now the second president in U.S. history to win non-consecutive terms.
And so you see this massive explosion, everybody like that. And then this second video here is one of the key things. It was the case all night long when people were looking is how did Harris perform in comparison with Biden in the 2020 election. And there was, they said she had to meet or exceed him in these number of these key places. Well, on CNN's coverage, Jake Tapper went to the board and said, hey, actually, can you pull up all the places where she's outperforming Biden?
So you asked, are there any places that the vice president is overperforming Joe Biden in 2020? So we could show you that as well. We just bring that out here. Harris overperforming 2020.
Holy smokes.
There you go. So let this go away and see if there's anything on the east side there.
Literally nothing?
Literally nothing.
Literally not one county?
By 3% or more, at least in the county right now. And so you come in full county there. So there you see, but that's states, yeah. So in counties, in 58 counties.
That was incredible. The blank, it's like all the lights in America went out. I mean, that was a real metaphor for the campaign, that she underperformed everywhere, in every demographic, in every state, in every county. I mean, it was stunning. I didn't expect that. How about you?
Well, no, that's sort of like that satellite nighttime photo of North Korea. No lights.
Exactly how I thought. Yeah.
This, what fascinates me about Trump is, while the media has gone out of its way now to portray him as, fascist, Adolf Hitler, reincarnation of Joseph Stalin, you saw at the Al Smith dinner, where he's there with this disgrace of a governor, Hochul of New York, and with Eric Adams, equally disgraceful mayor. Trump was not vicious or mean at them. He could have said some really cutting things, but he didn't. He went out of his way to say, if I'm reelected, Governor Hochul will work together to make New York great again. And the same with Eric Adams. So there is that aspect of Trump where he's not as vindictive as Joe Biden has been, and certainly as Kamala Harris would have been. And so I think some of the dramatic changes you're going to see right off the bat, the January 6th, the people who have been convicted of the bogus charges about insurrection on January 6th, they're going to be let out of jail. There will be a blanket pardon. They're coming out. You're going to get control of the border. This Mayorkas, he very well could face criminal indictment. You're going to get rid of Christopher Wray. He's not going to be there as FBI director. Hopefully, Trump doesn't make the mistake that he did of appointing an insider at CIA to run the CIA. He's going to put somebody in charge of the CIA who's actually going to be able to follow lawful orders from the White House. So, this is going to be a big shakeup, and particularly from the Department of Defense standpoint. Do you think Lloyd Austin is going to be able to go back to Raytheon, and the reason they wanted him on his board, that he would be able to influence Department of Defense decisions? Now, those people who are associated with Biden, they may be toxic because the companies get back and said, we want to try to influence the Trump administration, and these people are not necessarily going to be welcome knocking on their door. So
I don't know, man. I think you underestimate it. I think that they'll just say, "Hey, we'll just go back to the bullpen and wait until 4 years later." So they're not going to give up that easy.
Yeah, no, I don't say they're giving up. It's just, but this is going to be an interesting form of chaos.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of it thinking. There's so many things going on. I actually had a show on Monday. That there are some real fundamental fault lines running through our country that no matter who won the election, I said that, there's still the risk that it's very real if things go in bad directions where we could have real civil unrest. And
yes,
so Trump is going to have to really do a lot to make sure that those faults don't get exacerbated any. And, unfortunately, there are other forces that are going to work to try and exacerbate those. So we're not out of the woods yet, regardless of who won this election. It's something we all got to be very vigilant towards.
I fully concur.
Listen, thanks for coming on today. This is really history making and things that we're talking about here. But be sure for everybody, go to sonar21.com. Don't wait till Larry comes on the next time here. He's always got a lot of great stuff to share on his site there. We go there a lot and get a lot of good ideas. You should too. So thank you for that, Larry. And we'll look forward to seeing you next time you're here.
Thank you, Brother Davis.
Appreciate you guys also. Be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already. And just as a reminder, we're on podcast now. I know a lot of you don't always get a chance to watch a video, but you do get a chance to listen to it in your car or put it on your headphones or whatever you may have. Go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podcast Addict, anywhere you get your podcasts. Type in Daniel Davis Deep Dive, and you'll find us there waiting for you. Thank you very much, and we will see you on the next episode of Daniel Davis Deep Dive.